This is Russia, the largest country in the world, spanning all the way from its capital of Moscow in Eastern Europe to the far edge of Asia. Let's wrap our head around the size of Russia. First, Russia is over twice as large as the contiguous United States. It is almost 4 times as large as the European Union. Alright, we've established how Russia appears on the globe, but to really get Russia, this map is a little bit deceptive. As you may notice, the north and east of Russia are almost empty of cities. This map colorizes Russia by the population density, and it is essential to understanding Russia. When someone says they're from Russia, they're much more likely to be from around Moscow than under the label for Russia on the globe. Russia's dramatic imbalance in population density is caused by geography. You've probably heard the old stereotype that Russia is practically synonymous with an Arctic climate, but in a country this large, it's no surprise the truth is more nuanced. This map shows the climates of Europe and Russia. As you can see, southwestern Russia is far from an Arctic wasteland. In fact, Moscow has a similar climate to Berlin or New York. Also, look at how this band of light blue extends to the east. Let's look back at the population density map. Check out the cluster of cities in the central south and how they follow that light climate band. That's not a coincidence. Also, notice how these southern cities almost form a small line connecting the east and west of Russia. These cities roughly follow the Trans-Siberian Railway, which links Russia's west and east. If Moscow is Russia's heart, the Trans-Siberian Railway is the spine. Since its completion, the railway has been integral to Russia's military and economic strategy, because there is no other viable option for trans-Russian coordination. At the far eastern end of the railway is Vladivostok, a port city which also holds the Russian Pacific Fleet. When you think about the Russian presence in the east, think about Vladivostok, loosely tied to the heartland by a single railroad spanning thousands of miles. Vladivostok is also valuable to Russia because it is a warm water port. The Arctic coast of Russia isn't suitable for ports because of winter freezing. As such, the acquisition of warm water ports has influenced Russia's foreign policy for centuries, and its impact continues to this day. The first key warm water port is St. Petersburg, established by Peter the Great in 1703. As you can see, St. Petersburg lays on the Baltic Sea, allowing Russian sea commerce with Europe. St. Petersburg was so important that Peter the Great built the famous Peter and Paul Fortress there, and a shipyard, and then made it Russia's capital. It was Peter's window to the West, allowing him to glimpse the shining technological progress of Western Europe in the Enlightenment. St. Petersburg is still a major commercial hub and a bustling city, although the capital was moved back to Moscow. Another warm water port is Kaliningrad, the small Russian western enclave. Germany ceded Kaliningrad to Russia following World War II, and since then the city has prospered as it funnels trade from Europe to Russia. Also, Kaliningrad hosts Russia's Baltic Fleet. The last warm water port I'm going to highlight is in the Crimea, which you may recall Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Russia now has de facto and controversial ownership of the Crimean Peninsula, including the key city of Sevastopol in the southwest. Sevastopol is a major port, and it houses the Russian Black Sea Fleet. There's a very clear pattern here. Throughout modern history, Russia has always sought warm water ports, and they will keep seeking them for the foreseeable future. Russia's position straddling Europe and Asia is another factor in its history. Russia has never been fully accepted as European, and the Russian state has never manifested many of the traits we associate with European society. I would place the origins of this phenomenon with the Mongols. In the 1200s, the Mongols rapidly took over much of Asia and the fringes of Europe, including most of Russia. Throughout the centuries of Mongol control, or, following the collapse of the empire, of Mongol influence, Russia developed a culture of its own. It certainly wasn't Mongolian, but it wasn't like its European neighbors either. In the wake of the Mongols, the Duchy of Muscovy, with its capital at Moscow, united Russia. Russia also developed a particularly autocratic government under its czars. As the 19th century revolutions brought political reform in Western and Central Europe, Russia remained a bastion of extreme conservatism. Ultimately, the proletariat did rise up in the middle of World War I in 1917, and Russia plunged into civil war. During the conflict, Western powers actually invaded Russia in an attempt to stop the communist takeover. In hindsight, we know that Stalin's regime in Russia worked out poorly for everyone. However, let's take a moment to think about this from the Russian perspective. Your people have borne the worst of the cost of the Great War for long enough. Too many have starved or died, and they overthrow the brutal regime of the Tsar and install a new government, of the people and for the people. In response, your own allies betray you and invade, but they're unable to stop you. In the wake of World War II, the USSR developed an iron curtain of puppet states around its borders. I'm certainly not defending the tyranny the USSR imposed on these puppet states. However, this policy is a lot more comprehensible when you view it in the context of the Soviet narrative that Western society is out to get Russia. The Soviet Union lasted until 1990, when it rapidly dissolved as member countries gained their independence. The now independent Russian Federation worked to establish the Commonwealth of Independent States, serving the same economic and security goals the USSR had for Russia. This brings us to the present and the conclusion of the video. I hope you've enjoyed. My goal is not to dive into the depths of Russian history, but to give an analysis of the details most relevant to understanding modern Russia. I hope you'll join me next time as we work to understand history.